Last night he posted on social media a photograph of him and First Lady Melania Trump in formal attire, next to a photograph of you and your wife. You appear to be in a restaurant booth or something. Your wife is a psychiatrist. She's wearing a hijab. The caption was "Two very different Americas." What was your response when you saw that?
Welcome back to Clips News. In this segment, we bring you an in-depth breakdown of Michigan's high-stakes U.S. Senate race following a dramatic Democratic primary victory. We examine how progressive candidate Dr. Abdul El-Sayed plans to tackle the state's crushing affordability crisis while taking on former Republican Congressman Mike Rogers in the upcoming general election. You will see how El-Sayed addresses internal party divisions, navigates heavy criticism from fellow Democrats, and responds directly to a controversial social media post from Donald Trump. Furthermore, we explore the major political waves created by a private phone call between El-Sayed and former President Barack Obama, complete with expert panel analysis on what it means for unifying the Democratic base. Let's jump right into the coverage.
The Trump administration, as you know, is trying to paint a rosy picture of the economy. You and others are pointing to the affordability crisis affecting people in Michigan and elsewhere. Democratic voters are frustrated, as I don't need to tell you. They don't think that your party's doing enough to fight Donald Trump on these issues, especially like affordability. If you're elected as a Democratic senator with a Republican president in November, what can you actually do about that?
Well, look, let me just tell you the picture from my state. We've been up and down the state now. I've been at this for 15 months, been to 110 cities, over 500 public events. Everywhere I go, people say the same thing. It just shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't be this hard to afford your groceries or fill up your tank or worry about getting sick without having to worry about losing everything too. And we ran this campaign to do three things: get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all. When I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, the first thing we need to do is start holding the Trump administration accountable. You know, when we win, God willing, I will take my seat as a member of a Senate majority. That gives us subpoena power to be able to investigate all of the ways that this administration has used their power for their gain and enrichment and against ours. And I think that means hauling them up to really understand all the conversations that were had about who got to get refunds after this terrible tariff policy, who got to get excluded from those refunds. It means hauling up people like RFK Jr. and holding them accountable for the doging of our public health apparatus, for which we now need to be dodging lettuce across the state of Michigan for fear of getting explosive diarrhea, which nobody ever thought would be a consequence of electing Donald Trump, but here we are. So it's those powers and then the ability to set up to build the runway for a president in 2028 who can come in and start doing the things to hold big corporations accountable, to start enforcing antitrust policy, to start rethinking our tax system so it's less burdensome on everyday people and we're taxing billionaires their wealth, and to stand up for unions who have been critical to winning fair wages.
One of your main campaign issues, as you noted, is Medicare for all. Senator Bernie Sanders' proposal right now only has 17 co-sponsors in the Senate. Even if Democrats do take back the Senate in November, it doesn't look, as of now, like you and Senator Sanders would have the votes to pass it. Are there more immediate things that Democrats in the Senate can do to lower the cost of health care right now? Or do you view any of these more minor ideas as weak?
We can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we need relief. There's a lot that's about to hit and hasn't even hit yet when it comes to cutting ACA subsidies, when it comes to cutting Medicaid for people who desperately need health care. I think we need to start with making those whole. I also think we need to ban some of the middlemen in our healthcare system, like pharmacy benefit managers, an organization or a set of organizations that most people haven't heard of, but they're a big reason why you pay more on prescription drugs. I also think we can start enforcing antitrust policy when it comes to big healthcare, partnering with my friend, Senator Elizabeth Warren, on taking on the consolidation in the healthcare system. But Medicare for all is where we need to go. And my hope is, both coming out of the 2026 midterms and then out of 2028, that we're going to be on our way to a Senate majority to be able to get this done. I've also been clear, I think the filibuster is anti-democratic on its own terms. And so I do hope that the Senate is willing to actually deal with the fact that we cannot allow the entire Senate to hide behind the filibuster of one senator, and we need to actually have democracy in the U.S. Senate again. So yes, Medicare for all is where we need to go. In the interim, we're going to do everything we can to start lowering prescription drug prices and health insurance premiums and prices, but we need to get to Medicare for all to guarantee every single person the health care that they need and deserve.
In your vision of Medicare for all, would that be the end of private health insurance?
No, not necessarily. I travel the state and I talk to union members all the time who say, look, we gave up increases in wages to be able to win good health care, and we're worried about what that might mean. To me, Medicare for all is not about what it takes away. It's about what it offers. Guaranteed health insurance from cradle to grave that you don't lose by turning 26 or turning 65 or getting married, getting divorced, getting a job, losing a job. It's there for you as you need it. And it will be good wherever you need to get your health care. It's not about taking anything away. It's about adding the guarantee, the security of having health insurance in your life in the way that seniors across this country have been able to benefit from. And it would make this more sustainable for seniors as well. The best single thing you could do to make Medicare more sustainable for our seniors is to make sure young people who tend to pay more into the system than they take out are in that system instead of paying money into the pockets of health insurance CEOs.
Your victory.
As the discussion kicks off, the host frames the central economic dilemma facing voters. While the current administration insists the economy is thriving, everyday working families in Michigan are feeling the squeeze of a severe affordability crisis. On screen, El-Sayed responds by emphasizing his extensive ground campaign, having traveled to over 100 cities across the state. He argues that basic necessities like groceries, gas, and healthcare have become dangerously out of reach for average citizens. To tackle this directly, he outlines a three-part platform focused on removing corporate money from politics, putting cash back into middle-class pockets, and pushing for Medicare for all. When questioned about how a Democratic senator could enact real change under a Republican president, he points to the crucial leverage of Senate subpoena power. He vows to use oversight authorities to investigate corporate tax loopholes, tariff refund exemptions, and rollbacks on public health protections, while setting up a long-term foundation to rein in big corporations and billionaire wealth. The conversation then transitions to the practical realities of achieving healthcare reform in a divided government. When asked how he expects to pass Medicare for all, given its limited co-sponsors in the Senate, El-Sayed clarifies that progressives must be capable of pursuing immediate relief while holding on to long-term goals. On screen, he details actionable intermediate steps, including defending Affordable Care Act subsidies, protecting Medicaid, and cracking down on middlemen like pharmacy benefit managers who inflate prescription drug costs. He also advocates for aggressive antitrust enforcement against massive healthcare monopolies and urges the elimination of the Senate filibuster, calling it an anti-democratic obstacle to passing meaningful legislation. Responding to concerns about the future of private health insurance, he reassures viewers that Medicare for All is designed to add universal security rather than strip away existing coverage, ensuring guaranteed healthcare from cradle to grave, regardless of life changes or employment status.
On Tuesday was big, and you beat the Democratic establishment, no question. I'm not trying to take away from it, but you want a plurality, not a majority, and more than 700,000 Democrats in Michigan voted for your opponent. And now Mike Rogers, your Republican opponent, is trying to talk to those voters. What kind of work do you have to do to unify Democrats behind you in Michigan?
Yeah, it was a hotly contested primary, and we aired our differences. But in the end, the voters in the Democratic Party in the state of Michigan voted, and they picked a future where we get money out of politics, put money in your pocket, pass Medicare for all. But the differences that we hashed out are so much smaller than the similarities that we share. A responsibility to stand up to Donald Trump and the ways that he's used his power for his own gain, for his family's finances, rather than to improve your family's finances. The recognition that Mike Rogers is nothing more than a corporate shill. He's never seen a corporate PAC check he didn't want. Helped to architect the opioid epidemic back when I was in high school. Voted 19 times to raise prescription drug prices, moved to Florida, made $14 million he doesn't really want to explain. So this is a guy who has no business in the U.S. Senate, and all of us agree. And so you're seeing folks come together and say, listen, despite the fact that we hashed out our differences in that long, hard-fought primary, this is the opportunity right now to unite around what needs to be done. And that's holding the Trump administration accountable rather than sending a guy who's going to be a rubber stamp on everything that Trump wants to continue to do that's making life less affordable for Michiganders and life harder for the rest of us, for all of us.
One of your former Democratic...
Moving into internal party dynamics, the host points out that while El-Sayed scored an impressive primary victory against the party establishment, he secured a plurality rather than a blowout majority, leaving over 700,000 Democratic voters who backed other candidates. The visual shifts as the host asks how he intends to consolidate the party base before Republican opponent Mike Rogers can capitalize on those divisions. El-Sayed acknowledges the intense primary debate, but insists that the common goal of standing up to Donald Trump far outweighs any internal policy disagreements. He sharply criticizes Mike Rogers, labeling him a corporate insider who repeatedly voted to raise prescription drug prices and supported policies that hurt working-class families. El-Sayed argues that Michigan Democrats, regardless of who they backed in the primary, are ready to unite against a candidate who would serve as a rubber stamp for corporate interests and the Trump administration's economic policies.
Opponent, state legislator Mallory McMorrow, supports you, endorsed you right out of the gate, but she says she told you that in her view, you need to improve on, quote, being able to recognize that there are good people who just have a slightly different worldview. It's not turning everybody into an enemy, unquote. It was a similar criticism to what we heard from New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg, who wrote that you have, quote, a blind spot, one endemic to his movement, an inability to grasp how and why people of good faith might see the world differently, unquote. How do you respond to those criticisms?
No, I understand that we might see the world differently, but we also recognize the responsibility to come together. I was grateful for the conversation I got to share with Senator McMorrow, and also grateful for the conversation I got to share with the New York Times columnist. We have an opportunity right now to recognize that whatever differences we might have less to do with a moral bankruptcy and a lot more to do with differences in perspective. But what I will tell you is this. When you look at what Donald Trump is doing, when you look at what Mike Rogers wants to do and has done when he was in Congress, there are big moral questions to be asked. Should you be enriching yourself and your family to the tune of $2.2 billion via the presidency? Should you be using corporations as pawns in this game to enrich yourself and giving them favors so that they can raise rates and prices on all of us? Should you be in a scenario where you're questioning the outcomes of democratic elections? And I question the moral bankruptcy at the heart of that. Now, look, I've had a lot of different disagreements with some of my Democratic colleagues, and those are disagreements built on good faith differences when it comes to policy. But this is the time for us to come together now to take on the moral rot at the core of the Trump administration and the moral rot at the core of the corporatism that drives a guy like Mike Rogers, and I'm looking forward to locking arms to do that.
Speaking of President Trump,
The dialogue turns to sharp critiques coming from within his own party, highlighting comments from former primary opponent Mallory McMorrow and political columnists who argue that El-Sayed struggles to understand voters with differing worldviews. On screen, El-Sayed pushes back thoughtfully, explaining that he deeply respects good faith policy differences among fellow Democrats and recognizes the necessity of building a broad coalition. However, he draws a firm line when it comes to the actions of Donald Trump and Mike Rogers, framing their platform as a fundamental moral issue rather than a simple difference of opinion. He points to self-enrichment, corporate favors that drive up consumer prices, and threats to democratic norms as core moral failures that demand a unified response. He stresses that while internal debates on policy details are healthy, now is the time for all factions of the party to lock arms and fight back against corporate greed and political corruption.
last night he posted on social media a photograph of him and First Lady Melania Trump in formal attire, next to a photograph of you and your wife. You appear to be in a restaurant booth or something. Your wife is a psychiatrist. She's wearing a hijab. The caption was "Two very different Americas." What was your response when you saw that?
Yeah, he's right. One in which your overlords are two people who don't like each other but joint in the interest of making billions of dollars off of you, or two people who genuinely love each other, enjoyed some pancakes together, want to come together to build the kind of America where they can raise a family and know that that family is going to have the good things. So yes, you got two different visions of America. Donald Trump's vision is the one you're living in right now. Can you afford your gas? Can you afford your groceries? Do you believe when you look your kids in the eye that they're going to have a better future than you did? And Sarah and I are running because when we look our daughters in the eye, Amedi and Sirine, we want them to believe that they're every bit as able to have a better future than the one that they could have had under the Trump administration, that they can live together with their sisters and their brothers in America in a way where they lock arms to build the good things that they deserve together, where they know they'll have the healthcare that they need and good jobs, and that they don't have to go 15 minutes and know that there are kids who live 15 minutes away whose lives are very, very different than theirs because we've been for far too long okay with a level of inequality in this country. I want them to live in an America where they can breathe clean air and drink clean water. And actually, Sarah and I like each other. I don't know about the First Lady and the President, but from what I've heard, it's a bit of a rocky road.
Breaking this morning is
The visual tone shifts as the host brings up a recent social media post from Donald Trump featuring side-by-side photos, one of Trump and Melania in formal attire, and another of El-Sayed alongside his wife Sarah, a doctor who wears a hijab, captioned as two very different visions of America. El-Sayed welcomes the comparison, arguing that the post accurately captures a fundamental choice between two contrasting futures. He contrasts Trump's vision, marked by corporate wealth accumulation and economic strain for everyday families, with his own vision of a grounded, working family fighting for clean air, safe drinking water, and affordable health care. On screen, he speaks passionately about building an inclusive country where future generations can thrive without extreme wealth inequality. He uses the moment to pivot away from personal attacks and reframe the narrative around the tangible daily struggles of Michiganders who are struggling to keep up with rising living costs under current economic policies.
the news that you spoke with President Obama. Is he going to campaign with you? Tell us about the conversation.
I like to keep private conversations private, but it was a really, really warm conversation. I was really grateful for his advice. And, we've got a long road to go here, but we're perfectly unified in the need to win Michigan, take back the Senate, and hold Donald Trump accountable. And I was just really, really appreciative of him, his advice. I mean, this is a guy who I watched come up. I never saw myself in politics until I saw him give that 2004 speech on the DNC floor. It's the first time I ever saw myself reflected in politics at all. So it was just really an honor to get to share a conversation, to hear his advice on the campaign. And I'm looking forward to moving forward here in this campaign with that advice, to think through how we build the kind of a political movement that gets money out of politics, put money in your pocket, and pass the Medicare for all.
He won Michigan twice, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you. Do you expect that he will come and campaign for you?
I hope so, but obviously we've got a lot more to do here. But it was a really, really warm conversation, and I was really, really grateful for his advice and his mentorship.
Breaking news takes center stage as the host brings up a recent private phone call between El-Sayed and former President Barack Obama, asking if the former president plans to hit the campaign trail in Michigan. On screen, El-Sayed expresses immense gratitude for the conversation, recalling how watching Obama's iconic 2004 DNC speech was the very moment he first saw himself reflected in American politics. While keeping the specific details of their discussion private, he describes the call as extremely warm and filled with valuable strategic advice on unifying the party base. He underscores that both he and Obama share a clear, unified goal: winning Michigan, taking back the Senate majority, and holding the current administration accountable. Though he stopped short of confirming a joint campaign appearance, he reiterates his deep respect for Obama's mentorship and expresses optimism about building a massive political movement capable of driving real change for working families.
Group chat is back. I want to show this headline from Vox: "Don't call this man the next Obama," which I think is very tempting. I think if Democrats want something more than a Rogan of the left, they probably would just like an Obama of the present. What's your sense of, what do you see in this phone call? Is it just about, hey, make sure to reconcile, or is it, hey, you have my backing?
I don't know exactly, but what I will say is that Obama is playing a very key role in trying to unite the party in advance of these elections. And I think it's a more active role than he has played in previous cycles. And that is because the stakes are high. And there is, frankly, at this point, no leader of the Democratic Party that has the same kind of stature and weight that Obama has. And so that phone call is really an important one. That said, Abdul El-Sayed has said not very nice things in the past about former President Obama, has tried to distance himself from some of the policies that Obama had in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera.
Well,
so
nice
it's not cozy.
Nice things are the things we've heard from, I think, Democrat critics for a long time. He said, as with many of the outcomes of Obama's presidency, inspiring intentions unfulfilled or reversed. I think that's a pretty, actually, kind of common sentiment you hear on the left. Can we talk briefly about Mike Rogers? He is talking about the fact that Abdul El-Sayed has a lot of work to do with those voters who voted for Stevens, who are in more rural parts of the state. Here's an example of what he had to say.
and to the vast majority of people across Michigan who do not want to throw their support behind a campaign filled with anger, divisiveness, calls for violence, and the views that are out of touch with your values, well, you have a home with us.
So he's not Ken Paxton, but he has his work cut out for him. Can you talk about why? What is it why this is still close despite what he's saying and despite an electorate that maybe right now isn't fully aligned with what Abdul El-Sayed's proved his electorate is?
It's not just rural voters he's appealing to. He's appealing to the black voters that overwhelmingly went for Haley Stevens. My husband's from Michigan, and he told me beforehand, he said this will be the Dearborn versus the Detroit election. And that is largely what the primary looked like, right? Haley Stevens cleaned up with black voters, with non-college educated voters. And Michigan, I think, has the fourth lowest population of college graduates. And that's why Republicans see a pickup here, you know? And that's why, you know, it might be a bit of an own goal that it's Ken Paxton that they're going to have to dump a lot of money behind, because that money could go very far in Michigan.
Begging, I think, on Sunday. He was saying, look, we're going to need more money here in Washington, so it's not subtle.
Everyone knew that making Texas, choosing Ken Paxton, especially since it's James Tallarico, means that that's going to be a bit of a money suck. Mike Rogers might be uniquely positioned to do as well as any Republican can. Remember, he very narrowly lost to Alyssa Slotkin, who ran straight down the middle. She tried to make herself look as moderate as possible.
He wasn't able to win on a Trump year, right? He wasn't able to take advantage of coattails.
Yeah, say that. So now you have El-Sayed trying to make this the contrast election, saying that Mike Rogers is going to be a rubber stamp for Donald Trump, trying to put Trump on the ballot, and frustrations potentially with President Trump as something to, you know, as a talking point in this election. But I did want to say on the Obama point, you asked about what it might signal in this. We saw a similar pattern with Mamdani in New York, where first there was a phone call where he offered behind the scenes to be a sounding board for him, just to get to know you sort of call. And then several months later, over some time, then we saw him make that visit to New York City to appear with him. So we don't know what former President Obama might do in the end, right?
You're saying we've got a precedent.
But that's the way that he is.
I think they want to see, he wants to see how this goes, what else might come out.
I like her analogy because Mamdani had only won 51% of the vote in New York. He needed someone to come in and be like, hey, there's some more work to do.
The final section shifts to the CNN analysis panel, where political commentators break down the broader implications of the Obama phone call and the steep electoral path ahead in Michigan. The panelists observe that Barack Obama is taking a far more active, hands-on role in unifying the Democratic Party this election cycle due to the immense national stakes and his unique standing as a party elder. They note that while El-Sayed has previously voiced progressive critiques of past administration policies, both sides recognize the urgent need to bridge internal gaps. The panel outlines the geographic and demographic divide from the primary, highlighting how Republican candidate Mike Rogers is attempting to peel away moderate, rural, and working-class voters who backed establishment candidates. Drawing parallels to past high-profile races, the commentators suggest that Obama's outreach serves as an initial stepping stone to build trust, unify a divided electorate, and lay the groundwork for potential high-visibility campaign appearances down the line. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and want to stay updated on the latest news and political commentary, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.